There's something incredibly charming about stop-motion animation. I've never really been able to explain what that is, but only that it's a magic trick that I never get tired of watching. But here's a question. How do you remove a character from an artificial world constructed with miniatures and blend them into a world that is real without the effect coming across awkwardly? How do you combine stop-motion and live action? Here's a setup we've all seen before. You've got a terrifying rubber monster laying waste to an entire cityscape, but instead of being staged creatively, it's covered like this. Shot reverse shots of people reacting in horror and close-ups of the monster slowly moving towards the camera. Employ it once, fair enough. Anything more than that, and it just comes across as phony. To make it at all believable, you have to stage the action in a master wide, which means that the stop-motion creature needs to be integrated into the image. That was the dilemma at the heart of the work done by this man, Ray Harryhausen, one of the medium's most beloved craftsmen. Let's take a look at how he constructed this shot in The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Everything begins with this original on-location shot of the New York harbor. In his studio, Harryhausen set this up via rear projection using a modified projector that he could advance one frame at a time. In front of that went the animation stand, stop-motion model, and 35mm camera. But here was the clincher. The final version of the shot has the model emerging in front of the horizon line, but behind this line of crates. To place the creature between the two and to do it in camera, Harryhausen would place a sheet of glass in between his camera and the animation table, and create two versions of the same shot. For the first, he would apply black paint to the glass pane to cover everything below the line of crates, leaving only the model and the rear projected image for the camera to see. Animation on the model would commence frame by frame, but only the top section here was exposed. Everything covered up remained unexposed. When he was done, he would wind the film and the camera back to the start of the shot, but this time he would do the opposite. A new sheet of glass would be brought in, and everything above the line of crates was now covered up. The shot would be run through again with the film exposed for a second time, but now the effect was complete. Develop the film, and the creature is now sandwiched into the middle of the shot behind the line of crates. 3 layers combined into one final composite. That's the best way to think of it. Layers upon layers upon layers. If you've ever worked inside Photoshop or Premiere or any other nonlinear editing system, it's the same basic principle, constructing an image out of multiple different building blocks, one on top of the next. That basic principle was behind nearly everything Harryhausen did. The process, dubbed Dynamation, was slow, methodical, and as you can imagine, backed by an insane degree of preparation.
Open the door of the cage.
For instance, what are the ways you can have a stop-motion creature physically interact with footage of the actors on set? In the big monster movies, you could always have the creature's arm flatten extras, but it doesn't quite sell. How about this instead? That's more like it. All it takes is proper coordination and a little creative thinking. On set, actor Kerwin Matthews was lifted by a wire, and then on the stop-motion stage, Harryhausen filled the shot out by giving him a little artificial foot, attaching an additional model boot in the Cyclops' hand that's animated right alongside. Go frame by frame, and you can spot when Harryhausen makes the change from one to the next. At full speed? Well, maybe you can spot it pretty easy. Try this shot. When their swords clash together, you can see where he's added in an extra bit of model sword on top of the skeleton sword. A little contact point between actor and creature, like a little bit of extra glue to seal the layers together. You can spot it paused, but at full speed, you don't really notice it. Harryhausen did this kind of thing everywhere, adding bits to swords in mid-fight, or ropes lassoing dinosaurs, replacing a spear in mid-throw, or an axe hitting its mark. All the actor had to do on set for a shot like this was follow through with the action but let the axe drop away. and on the stop-motion stage, Harryhausen could mask it out and insert a model over the scene. Like the wire work we looked at a second ago, this is where on-set rigging could be a really valuable asset, especially with simpler actions like props being ripped away from actors or sets fixed to fall apart. Here's an interesting one. Contact points were one thing, but close quarters interaction between actor and creature was always tough. In the early days, like when Harryhausen was working with his mentor Willis O'Brien on Mighty Joe Young, they could create shots like this, where the actor is lifted on a wire and the model animated in conjunction. But the spectrum of action with this kind of shot was limited. You couldn't throw an actor around, you couldn't have them manhandled. So for shots with the most intricate interaction, they would resort to using models of the actors that were animated alongside the creatures. You see this kind of technique popping up in a lot of early monster movies like this. Willis O'Brien employed the same trick when he was working on King Kong, and it's a curious little workaround, one that Harryhausen carried into his own films, and that he was always trying to overcome. For instance, take this shot from 1 million years BC, where Harryhausen and the crew pull a little Texas switch to mask the transition from the actor to the model. Looks a little goofy, doesn't it? But just a few years later, in the Valley of Gwangi, they were able to execute the same kind of shot, but with slightly more complex wirework, therefore delaying the need for a model-actor replacement until the edit cuts into a close-up. It's not perfect, and I don't think he was able to get interactions like these fully in sync, but the more that he worked, the more he tried. The results might come across a little hokey, but I think something like this is a tribute to the way that Harryhausen grappled with limitations like these, always trying to push back the line of what was possible in order to find practical solutions. It's easy, especially when looking at his movies with modern-day eyes, to pick up on the places where those limitations are rather glaring, where the seams between the elements tend to stand out. Matte lines that aren't always precise, or the roughness that comes with shots that have undergone numerous exposures, that sort of thing. A lot of that, of course, you could chalk up to the limits of what the technology of the day was capable of, but something that I think is just as worthy of consideration are the realities that affect the post-production process. In the writing that Harryhausen published during his retirement, in particular the books that he co-authored with Tony Dalton, this is a predicament that he returned to multiple times. Quote-unquote good visual effects aren't just about raw talent or the available technologies to produce them, but about the constraints of the budget and the amount of time given to crafting any individual shot. That's not an excuse so much as it is a reality. I don't think people outside the world of post are always cognizant of this. I don't think I was always cognizant of it. Camera movement is an example of this. Although there's the occasional panning shot like this, the majority of setups that feature stop-motion creatures are static, with action playing out in straight lines, perpendicular to the camera. Harryhausen wrote that he always would have liked to feature more camera movement, but that shots like these took so much more time to execute. And for Harryhausen, who mostly animated these scenes by himself, it was often just impractical. At the end of the day, it's about the budget and the deadline, and doing the best work you can within those constraints. But again, I think this is an area you could look at as a limitation that he found ways of overcoming. As his films went on, you can see him compensating for infrequent movement with shots that become more and more dynamic. Compositions get bigger, deeper, grander, and the movement of the characters becomes all the more subtle and eerie. And if nothing else, faster. Even now, 60 years later, this is still just nuts. For as much as his films may now look like a relic from the past, to watch them is to watch a craftsman tackle the same question that visual effects artists and engineers have been trying to solve every day before and since. Because, of course, that central question doesn't have a definitive answer. Expand it out from just stop-motion animation to the whole of visual effects, and it's all the more true. It's an answer that's in a constant state of evolution. In the same way that Harryhausen built on techniques developed by Willis O'Brien, companies like ILM and Weta have picked up where Harryhausen left off, constantly searching for new ways of bridging the gap between visual effects and live action in order to make the combination between the two seamless. And so, as Harryhausen often said, the snowball rolls on.
How would I like people to remember my work? Well, just that they enjoy it. I had many people come up to me and say how our films have changed their life. And I think that means more to me than anything else. Just as King Kong got me interested, the picture opened up a whole new world to me that I wouldn't have been conscious of. And I'm so happy today to hear these people say that our pictures have opened up a whole new concept for them. And so the snowball rolls on.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for watching. This was such a fun video to put together. I hope you liked it. The ins and outs of film history is something that I'm constantly fascinated by. And you know, we obviously live in a time where there are so many different options for entertainment that trying to branch out to find great new movies you haven't seen before can honestly seem a bit overwhelming. But if you're looking for a reliable place to start, I'd highly recommend Mubi. Mubi premieres a new film every day, from exciting work by up-and-coming directors to timeless classics from master directors to cult favorites you've never seen. And their strategy is one that I think is really brilliant. Instead of dumping just anything and everything onto the service, every film is curated, therefore every film feels special, like the staff pick section at a video store. And unlike other streaming services, I found that I wind up spending way less time browsing through endless titles and adding things to watch lists, and more time actually watching. Whether you're a cinephile or a film school freshman, there's always something new to discover. It's like having your own personal film festival streaming anytime, anywhere. If you're interested in giving Mubi a try, you can get an entire month of great cinema for free by going to Mubi.com/RoyalOcean to sign up today.